As the rear hatch of the shuttle Goddard lowered, Captain Montgomery Scott noticed a stern pair of dark-clad figures waiting. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked curiously. "Agent Dulmer, Department of Temporal Investigations," said the shorter, fair-haired man. "This is my partner, Agent Luxley. We'd like to ask you some questions about your experiences with time travel, Captain." From the agent's no-nonsense tone, Scott could tell it wasn't exactly a request. "Certainly, lads," Scott replied. "I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. The Goddard is a bit on the cramped side, however. I'm sure there's someplace more comfortable nearby. A lounge, perhaps?" The two agents exchanged a brief, silent look before the taller one spoke. "We've got some place more appropriate in mind," said Luxley. "3 to beam up." As the transporter effect began, Scott couldn't help but roll his eyes. "This ought to be a hoot," he thought to himself, as a familiar hum rose in his ears. The trio rematerialized in a small office suite. "Have a seat, Captain," said Dulmer, as he walked toward a chair behind a desk. "This shouldn't take long." Scott nodded and pulled out a chair. "I'd imagine you lads in Temporal Investigations like to make the most of your time, yes?" he said with a friendly grin. If the two agents were amused, it didn't show on either of their faces. "Let's begin, Captain," Dulmer replied irritably. "Oh, there's no need for formality here, Agent. You can call me Scotty." "According to our files, you've been involved in a number of temporal incidents in your career," Dulmer said, while reviewing a file upon a pad. "The incident involving Captain Christopher in 1969. Scott nodded, smiling as the memory replayed in his mind. "Aye, yes, and I don't mind saying, I'm still amazed we made it back to our time." As the two agents took notes, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble he was in this time. Luxley spoke next. "After that, there was a series of events involving the Guardian of Forever." He paused, exchanging a look with his partner. "While your participation was free of infractions, we certainly can't say that for your captain." "The man's a menace," added Luxley. "He seemed to inspire a cavalier attitude toward temporal infractions in his crew, including yourself." "And what do you mean by that exactly?" asked Scott defensively. "I think you recall the transparent aluminum incident of 1986, said Dulmer. "And please don't call it a predestination paradox." Scotty couldn't help but blush a little with embarrassment. "Is that what this is about, then? I mean, that happened years ago." 383 years, Dulmer said with a slight smirk, to be precise. "That's not what we're here for," added Luxley. "We'd like to ask you about an incident that took place aboard Enterprise while en route to the Babel Conference in 2268. "Ah," Scotty mused. "What can I tell you? The situation was well documented by the captain in his mission logs. We're more interested in an incident that took place off the record," Luxley continued, "during the battle with the Orion vessel." "The jig's up," thought Scotty. "They know." He cleared his throat before speaking. "I assume you're asking about my conversation there with Chekhov, yes?" "Correct," replied Dulmer, looking up from his notes. "Captain Pavel Chekhov." "Aye, well," Scotty responded, "I was doing my best to keep the mains online when Chekhov and another officer came running in, rambling on about alien assassins from the future and a bomb on the ship." "I see," said Luxley. "And was there any substance to these rumblings?" "Maybe they don't know," thought Scotty. "The whole story, at least." He smiled. "Well, there were plenty of aliens on board for the conference," Scotty said to Luxley. "And one of them was an assassin. As for the rest, well—" "Go on, Captain," Dulmer said, pausing to add some notes to his pad. "To be honest, lads, I'm not entirely certain that whole thing wasn't a hallucination on my part. We were in combat, and Enterprise had taken more than a few hits from that Orion ship. Could have been some fumes about in engineering." Fumes? Asked Luxley with an arched eyebrow. Funny that wasn't in any of McCoy's medical logs, Dolmer added. Well, Dr. McCoy had his hands full trying to save Ambassador Sarek's life at that time, Scotty replied. Must have slipped his mind. Anything else you'd like to add, Captain? Asked Luxley, apart from the fume-induced hallucination. Oh, I think that about covers it, Scotty said warmly. I'll be sure to inform your office if anything else comes back to me on the matter, however. Please do, said Dolmer as he stood. We hate loose ends. Greatly, added Luxley. Thank you for your cooperation, Captain. Scotty managed to smile as he stood. Any time, he said, as the transporter effect began once again. He materialized outside of the Goddard and wiped his brow with relief as he entered the shuttle and made his way to a secure compartment inside. He opened it and took out a small advanced device. Another fine mess you've got me into, Chekhov, Scotty mused. The next time you show up from the future, try to come back and pick up any gadgets you leave behind. He examined the strange device for a moment before setting it on a console. One of these days, you wee beastie, he said with a smile. One of these days, I'll get to the bottom of your mystery. Until then, I think it's time to find that lounge and a fine bit of scotch. He headed toward the rear hatch once again, failing to notice a glimmer of light suddenly emitting from the device.